If you're listening with children present, please use your discretion, as this episode contains adult topics and language. Also to be noted, this episode has been recorded on location. Often you will hear a thud or a pounding. This is Bob Scheiblein hitting his kitchen counter emphatically, as he is quite animated when telling his story. We hope you enjoy this episode of Shadow Clock.
Sugar, what's your room?
Yeah, we take it straight.
Just like I do.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I thought we could order in lunch or something.
Oh, I got a pot of chili that I made yesterday, and I can warm it up in 5 minutes. You need chili?
We're
have a
hungry.
cold beer.
Oh, a cold beer, did you say?
Oh, yeah. You want me to know?
Do you want a beer right now?
I could have.
I could do a beer right now.
Thank you.
The kind and hospitable voice you are hearing belongs to Bob Scheiblein, an 87-year-old ex-Navy service member, martial arts savant, and retired scuba instructor. The other voice you hear is my husband, Alejandro Velez, who graciously is running audio during this visit to Lake Wales, Florida, the town in which Bob lives.
Here's your spoon. See, I forget my walker every once in a while. I walk off without it.
If you didn't catch that, Bob's saying he often walks off without his walker, and he's not kidding. To be honest, he uses his walker more as an armrest while sitting than for anything else. Can I help you with anything? No? Man, you move fast, Bob.
You what?
You're just an active guy. You move fast.
I cheat. I got the walker.
You said you had a hip replacement, didn't you tell me that?
Yeah, January I had the hip replaced.
Oh.
I didn't fall.
If this was Bob at 87, I could only imagine what he was like in his 20s while serving in the Underwater Demolition Team, also referred to as the UDT, an elite division of the Navy that was created after World War II, and the forerunner to today's U.S. Navy SEAL program. UDT service members were trailblazers in underwater demolition, combat swimming, and commando training. Bob was trained to kill, as you'll hear him explain to me a bit later. It's important to keep in mind that during the 1950s, the decade in which Bob was enlisted, scuba was still being developed and explored. He was truly an underwater pioneer. And the 50s were exactly the years of Bob's life I had come to talk with him about. Except I hadn't come all the way to Florida to discuss his legacy in scuba and martial arts. I was here to talk about something else, another skill set per se, that Bob had secretly acquired while in the Navy.
When I went join the Navy, our monthly pay for back in the 40s was $30 a month. Now, that's not much nowadays, but $30 a month, plus I had all my food, my clothing allowance, and bedding and place to live, and everything except my cigarettes and stuff like that. It was a nice life, but $30 a month wasn't much in spending money.
And so, Bob decided to fix the problem and came up with a plan to help not just himself, but 3 other guys on the ship as well.
Now, my idea was this. There's 4 of us in a team, and we were friends. We pulled our money, and we grab our guns, steal a car, knock off a bank, go downtown, start drinking with the rest of the sailors, and then our money, guns, and everything is in the bags, and we carry back to the ship as personal shopping stuff.
And that's exactly what Bob and his friends did, until, of course, he wound up in Alcatraz. I'm Katie Mahalik, and you're listening to Shadow Clock. As when trying to understand anyone, it's important to start at the beginning, and Bob is no exception. Bob's mother was a widow and had had 2 kids before she met Bob's father, Jack Scheiblein.
Brother and sister, half-brothers, half-sister. They had a father, and he died, and she remarried Scheiblein, who was my dad.
Okay.
But Scheiblein, like me, was smart, and he had a job at a newspaper. This was Depression time, back in '31. Paid $1 a day or something like that. Good wages back then. But at nighttime, he was a bootlegger.
Bob and his siblings grew up 1 block from the Mississippi River in Muscatine, Iowa. It was during the night that Bob and his brother would accompany their father on fishing trips.
And we would go there to the river night fishing, and I didn't know what was going on.
Bob and his brother provided the perfect cover.
The booze would come down on the barge, and he was picking up this booze and delivering it. We made more money delivering the booze as bootlegger than we ever did as a printer, as a pressman.
Notice Bob says we here. We made more money as a bootlegger than a pressman for the paper. I found that comment striking. as Bob was only about 5 years old at the time.
My dad was a bad guy. I mean, when I got a costume for Halloween or something, it had to be a black hat cowboy. Not a white hat. And 2 guns, pearl handles.
Bob's dad didn't live long enough to find out his son actually took after him far more than he may have wanted him to. Bob was about 6 when he died.
My dad died of some kind of kidney disease. And my mother died of colon cancer right after that. She died within a year.
And so Bob and his 2 siblings were left without any parents or anywhere to go. It's important to understand here that Bob was the only biological son of his father. Jean and Dean were Bob's father's stepchildren, and this made all the difference when placing Bob in a new home.
Now, here we come to a difference in family. Scheiblein was a hoodlum. He was a bootlegger. So when my mother died, after my dad died, the family came in and took my brother and his sister away. And nobody wanted me, so one of the Scheibleins relation, the bootlegger, picked me up and took me to a place called Birdsville.
I found it eerily coincidental that the first place Bob was ever sent to against his will was Birdville. The filmmaker writer in me couldn't help but notice it, considering the last place he was sent unwillingly was Alcatraz, which means pelican in Spanish. And once I did notice it, I couldn't get the image of a bird frantically fluttering around in a cage out of my head. It really bothered me.
The Scheibleins, they were old people that lived in a one-room shack out in the middle of nowhere. And they had blankets hanging up from the ceiling, dividing the one-room shack into 4 rooms. 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. And that's where I lived for the first year. But these people, they were retired, living on, I don't know what. And I was a young kid. But these people eventually found out they could not handle me, take care of me. So they got rid of me.
A friend of Bob's father, who also worked at the newspaper in Iowa, found out that Bob was up for adoption. You'll notice that when Bob talks about him, he sometimes calls him Dad.
His name was Dobbins, George Dobbins, from Wisconsin. So he grabbed me and adopted me and gave me his family. But his wife didn't care too much for me. She never liked me. I felt that. And when she had more kids, I felt it even more, because then it became a babysitter and a Cinderella type of thing, only male version. I took Dad's lunch to him at the Reporter where he worked at, and I took care of the kids, I babysat, I did everything, but I was not a member of the family. Anyway, I lived there for a few years, and I had to get out of there. So I joined the Navy when I couldn't handle it no more. Joined at 17 and started robbing banks. There was 4 of us in a team, and we were friends. So we pooled our money, and we bought guns, hip holsters. Oh, we were badass. I had more guns on that ship than the Navy did. We'd go into town with our uniforms. We'd take our uniforms off, put civilian clothes on, grab our guns, steal a car, knock off a bank, go back, put our uniforms back on again, go downtown, start drinking with the rest of the sailors, and then our money, guns, and everything is in the bags that we carried back to the ship as personal shopping stuff.
Once the guys were on board, they would stick everything in their lockers and go to bed. Lights out. It was the perfect setup with the perfect cover. No one would suspect a group of sailors. The next day, the ship would leave, avoiding any roadblocks the police set up. And before they knew it, they were safe and sound in the next state and docking at the next port.
And that's when I left the normal world and joined my world. We would rob just little banks, no big bank, not a lot of money. And there was only 2 or 3 tellers. We take their money, and who's going to get hurt?
What do you say to them?
I'd open the safe.
Did you ever have to yell?
Yell? Raise my voice? I can't remember raising my voice. I talk like I'm talking to you. I said, this is a robbery. We're going to take all your money. Don't worry about it. We're not going to hurt you unless you cause us. You're not going to get hurt because it's insured. We'll take it and go. Nobody will know anything about it.
With 2 guns or one?
One.
I read that you used two pistols sometimes.
That was the author that said that. I'd never, you got to have one hand free to take the money on. So these guys take liberty with the stories.
Were you scared the
No.
first time?
I had the guns. Why should I be scared? They're the ones that were in trouble. I just walk in the door, and if there's a safe, only one person can open that safe, and he's the one that's the combination. And with me there, he's going to tell me the combination if I want it. One little girl on the third bank, she says, you know you can't get away with this. I said, honey, it's a funny thing you had to tell me that. The last 2 banks we robbed, they told me the same thing, and here I am robbing your bank. All they could see is that pistol.
Did you ever wonder what they were feeling?
No, I didn't care. As long as they give me the money, we got along well.
The authorities never did build up an MO on Bob and his team. Bob made sure that he kept all the variables of all their robberies different, down to never hitting the same state twice. And considering the ship was always on the move, docking in different ports, this was easy.
And I had this figured out to a T. We'd never get caught. We never did.
And what Bob means is, he never got caught for the banks he robbed while in the service.
During the Navy, there was 4 banks I robbed. Then I got out and I robbed 6 more. The 6th one, I got caught. That's the only bank they know I ever robbed.
But how did you get caught?
My partner snitched on me. He was a new one.
When Bob left the service, the original 4 made a pact that they would never contact each other again. It was a way to keep each other immune if one should go down for something else eventually. But Bob wasn't yet finished with his bank robbing scheme, and so he got another partner. Unfortunately for Bob, this guy didn't have the same code of honor as Bob's sailor buddies did.
When we went to this bank, we put everybody in the vault. We didn't lock them, man. We just put them in the vault. I cleaned out the tellers. We were about ready to go out the front door, and all of a sudden, we heard shots. The manager or somebody, got a gun inside the vault. He had it stashed. I don't know what caliber it was, but he got it out and was shooting at us. But the bullets were hitting the teller's cages and wasn't going through the glass. It was ricocheting. Anyway, we walked out and got in the car, and then a rifle started shooting at us, and they were tearing the car apart. And I was shooting those son of a bitches.
To give you some context, we're in the year 1956 in the state of Wisconsin during deer hunting season.
There was a sports bar right across the street, and all the shooting had got them excited, and they grabbed a deer hunting rifle. You know, Wisconsin's big deer hunters. They got guns every place. They come out and start shooting at us, and I just shoot the son of a bitch. Well, he said he was hunkered down. He wouldn't fire a gun. So I was trying to drive and shoot at the same time, and he seen somebody fall over in the mirror.
It truly sounded like a scene right out of the Wild West. In regards to the man Bob and his partner saw go down, Bob said the guy must have just slipped because no one was hurt during that getaway. But that incident was enough to make Bob's partner panic, thinking they had killed somebody. Specifically, that Bob had killed somebody.
We dumped the cars, took a plane, train, and whole works, and we were away. But 2 days later, we separated for long enough for him to get to a telephone, and he called the FBI and gave himself up and said, now, if anybody got hurt, Bob done all the shooting, not me. So when I got busted, he testified. He tried to testify against me. My attorney found out he was testifying. And he said, you're dead, Bob. So we pled guilty, and I threw myself at the mercy of the court. They gave me 15 years, and they put me in Terre Haute, Indiana.
Bob was at Terre Haute for 30 days before his partner showed up with a reduced sentence of a year, which he got for testifying.
As soon as he got there, they shipped me to Leavenworth. And because they knew that he wouldn't last a day.
You would have killed him.
Oh, yeah.
Like literally without a doubt.
I would have killed him. That's the way I am. I'm careful. I'm ready, prepared to go all the way.
Bob was moved to Leavenworth, which up until 2005 was a maximum security United States penitentiary in Kansas. While there, 2 significant things happened in regard to the rest of Bob's story. 1, Bob earned the nickname the Enforcer, for reasons I'll get into in a minute. 2, he met a guy who quickly became his best friend.
His name was Gino Scuselli. He's an armored car robber out of Chicago. He one of my best friends. And he was about 5'10", 5'7", 8". Bodybuilder. He had muscles where you ain't supposed to have muscles. He had muscles on top of muscles. He had no neck. But he was tough.
And this toughness made him a perfect sidekick for Bob, or rather, the enforcer. It was while putting this part of the story together that I realized I wasn't exactly sure why Bob earned this nickname. And so I called him and asked.
The enforcer came from where I was teaching some friends of mine, Gino.
Yes, your best
And
friend.
I taught him how to kill with his hands.
Like by what? How? Like by getting his hands around their neck?
No, martial arts. See, I learned a lot of that stuff in the UDT in the Navy.
Okay.
They teach you how to kill quietly and fast.
Man.
We all had special training, and I was very adept at that. So I got to be very, very, very good at it. But when I got when I entered Leavenworth, did I tell you they tried to mug me there once?
No, I never heard that story.
Well, see, I went to the commissary to pick up cigarettes and popcorn, candy bars, stuff like that. And there was 3 guys that are in this mugging team, and they were waiting at the back door for me to come back to the cell block with a bag full of groceries. Okay. And when I stepped in the door, they threatened me. And through my martial arts training, this is all reflex now. I never even put my grocery bag down. I just chopped out with my fingers and my right hand at the closest one's throat.
Oh, my God.
And hard. And then with a back spring, I came back and hit the guy right next to me with my elbow in the face. And then I swung straight across to the third one and knocked him down. All this before I even set my bag of groceries down.
Oh, my God.
Now, this was all reaction. There was a dozen convicts in cells that was watching this, and they started cheering me.
Huh.
Because these guys were known as muggers, and they were cheering that they were down. So when the guards came and arrested us, they took us all to the hole.
All of you?
Oh, yeah, all 4 of us. When you're in a fight, all 4 have to go to the hole. Oh, but they never mugged again after that.
Anyone or just you?
Well, as far as I know, anyone. Man. They lost their reputation when they got beat by one man.
Like big time.
And that's how I got the name of the enforcer.
His new name may have granted him protection from the other inmates, but it also made him a target for the warden. It was about 2 years into his stay that the convicts held a food strike in efforts to get better meals. Bob was asked by one of the ringleaders of the strike to enforce it by making sure all the inmates knew that someone had put glass in the hash. And that's exactly what Bob did. He let everyone know that unless they wanted glass down their throat, they better not eat. Bob never even knew if there really was glass in the hash. In this case, he was just the messenger. He is adamant about this.
So you started.
I didn't start it.
But you enforced it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they said I was an instigator. I started it. I wasn't.
That indignity that I could hear in Bob's voice after all this time, it took me off guard. It seemed like so long ago. And then it clicked for me. Only the worst of the worst were sent to Alcatraz. Bob never had any intention of ending up there. Alcatraz was for prisoners that couldn't be controlled anywhere else. And Bob, he was about to be sent there for reasons that he swore he had nothing to do with. It was only when Bob got on the transport that he realized he wasn't alone.
So when they chained us all up, belly chained, they had us alphabetically lined up. There was Gino Scuselli, my close buddy. And my name is Scheiblein, so our names are pretty close together. So he was right next to me. All the way to Alcatraz, we were handcuffed together. And he was crying all the way, not crying, pissing and moaning. It's all your fault I'm going there. You taught me how to do this shit. Now, here I am going to Alcatraz.
Apparently, because of Gino's new skill, he had also been called upon to enforce the strike. Considering neither of the two knew the other was involved until sitting next to each other on the transport, I'd say it's safe to say neither were ringleaders. But it didn't matter. It was too late. It's important to understand that no one is sentenced to Alcatraz. Convicts who are sent there are already doing time for their crimes elsewhere, and Alcatraz serves as a last resort, the ultimate punishment for those who the system can't break. The infamous prison sits out in San Francisco Bay, 1.25 miles from shore. It's perpetually swallowed by fog and equally engulfed by legends of man-eating sharks circling its base. It's no wonder that just looking at it across the choppy waters gives you the creeps.
I got off the bus with the belly chains and handcuffs and belly guards and all that kind of stuff, and I was standing on the dock waiting to get on the boat, looking out on that island with the prison on top of it and shrouded by fog. And I'm standing here with the dame enforcer and wondering if maybe there isn't 200 some inmates in Alcatraz who think they are an enforcer, and who I'm going to have to prove this to when I get in there, or what? What am I getting myself into?
And here we come to Bob's moment when it wasn't a moment of salvation that marked his life, but rather just the opposite.
Do you feel like there was a moment in your life where everything just changed?
What do you mean change?
So like
I don't shoot nobody anymore?
If you didn't catch that, Bob said that I don't shoot nobody anymore. And yeah, I guess you could say that's kind of what I meant.
Yeah, that. You. I'm just curious if there was a specific click, like a specific moment that.
I think it was a 5-year click of my time in Alcatraz. I don't lock the door. You know why? That cell, when it closes, it makes a noise unlike any prison, any jail, any place I've ever been. It's a noise in my head. I hear that cell block clinging shut. And boy, when it does, it bothered me. It hit my head, and it's been there ever since. Will never lock the door. I should hear that click. If I'd ever lock the door, I would hear that same sound. I'd be locked up in Alcatraz. That's bad. And to this day, I've never locked myself in to my own house since I got out in 1965. And my house has never been locked if I'm in it. So I'm against locking myself up. I won't do it. I won't do it voluntarily.
And so Bob began serving his time in one of the world's most notorious maximum security prisons, where some of the most infamous convicts have been kept, such as Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, and the Birdman.
When I got on the island, they were a different kind of convict altogether. Nothing you've ever met before. Titles, names, reputations, streetwise stuff, nothing meant nothing to them. On your, the ink on your number had to be dry. In other words, had been there for a while before they would admit that you're among them. You're nobody until you prove yourself you're okay.
However, in Bob's case, things were different for him when he arrived.
They adopted me right away. They said, you know about scuba diving? Come on over here. I want to talk to you. How do you make a regular? So I was welcomed into the clan immediately.
Scuba made Bob valuable to the others, considering if you wanted to escape, you better be more than comfortable in the water. From the first day, Bob got along fine.
It's a secret prison. No communication to the outside world. Maximum security, minimum privilege. No privileges whatsoever. You had to earn whatever you got. No newspapers, no news radios, no news magazines, no news at all. You don't even get the letter you're sent. Somebody sends you a letter, you get a typed letter. There's not the same wording. They change the words around, the codes. And there, when you're in your cell 23 hours a day, you don't get out of your cell. Your cell is locked. If you're in it, it's locked. And you come out 3 times a day for meals. 20 minutes a meal, that's it. It's for eating, not for conversing. And you don't get out of your cell to go wander down the block and talk to the anglers or something like that. I didn't even know what cell they lived in until I went back to the visit.
Bob is referring to John and Clarence Anglin, the 2 brothers who escaped, along with another man, Frank Morris. The 3 did make it off the island, but whether they made it to shore or not is another story. If you ask an inmate, they'll tell you they made it all the way down to South America, where they lived out the rest of their lives, or where they could still be living today. If you ask a guard, well, then that's a different story altogether. We'll come back to these guys, as I need to tell you about Bob's contribution to their escape.
Did you get visitors?
No, never. When I went in there, I said, I refused any visits whatsoever. I've seen too many people go almost crazy after doing a couple of years. And all of a sudden, their wife comes in, pretty perfumey and foo-foo stuff. And then after they leave, they go crazy. For the next 3-4 months, you can't even talk to them. They're all pissy and moaning. I will never have a visit while I'm in prison.
So with no visitors and no contact to the outside world, Bob settled in on the bottom tier, Block C. He didn't know it then, but he would be there for the next 5 years. Because Alejandro and I live in San Francisco, I've been to Alcatraz more times than I can count, especially since when people come to visit, the island is always on the top things to do. And no matter how many times I end up on that prison tour, it's the cold that really haunts me. You see, every time I go, I'm chilled to the bone, and not just from the phantom whispers that creep up behind me when walking the cavernous corridors. It's all of it. The damp cold seeps its way through any crack or crevice it can find in that unforgiving concrete fortress, slithering its way under the iron bars of each cell, assaulting you with its icy, knotted, gnarled fingers. I've never been there and not imagined what it must have been like to have that kind of cold wrapping itself around you day in and day out. I'm from the Midwest. I know cold. Alcatraz, it's a different kind of cold altogether. So please forgive me as I recognize my next round of questions are a bit strange to be asking a former bank robber, but I just couldn't help myself.
Did they give you pajamas? No. What did you sleep in?
Shorts.
Shorts. Did you have more than one blanket?
Yeah, you can have as many blankets as you want because it's cold.
I was gonna ask
and
you about
the
that.
bottom tier is the coldest. And I was the sixth cell in from the end on the first tier. But the second tier is warmer, and the third tier is not warmer yet. And you can request for a tier up there, a cell up there, and they'll give it to you. But you have to request for one. And that means you have to kowtow to a guard. You say, please, sir, can I move to... I will not do that. So for 5 years, had the same cell. I wouldn't move because you had to ask permission to move. And I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't ask guard for anything. In fact, I didn't even learn their names. Everyone was boss to me. I just say, hey, boss.
All right. Who cleaned your cells? You?
You.
What did the prison smell like? Have people asked you this yet?
No, I'm trying to think of what it did smell like. Probably Lysol. My wife used to scrub the floors with Lysol soap, and I complained to her. I said, don't use that shit. It smells like Alcatraz. So apparently it smelled like, it was clean. That place was spotless. The main corridor was called Broadway.
Yeah.
Okay. Broadway you could eat off of. It was like a dining room table. Oh, Alcatraz was super. That's all you had to do was clean. And everybody wanted a job, so then you got out of your cell to go to work.
You earned the privilege of getting a job through good behavior. Bob's first job was in the tailor factory for 10 cents an hour, until one day he accidentally cut off a chunk of his finger with the shears.
You see this car where I cut it all the way around? I was pushing the cutter, and the cutter ran into my finger. And they took me up to the hospital, and the surgeon up there put them all back together with stitches. And just, I matched up all the fingerprints, so it should be a good job. I said, well, thanks a lot. And I didn't like him for that.
The shears incident resulted in Bob being transferred from the tailor factory over to what Bob called the labor gang, which was much more Bob's style.
And now I'm back home again with a 20-pound sledge, and that's where Gino was, and doing games with him about how long you can hold a 20-pound sledge out at arm's length without it falling down. And we were knocking out walls, and I was getting toned up again, I was getting soft, working in a clothing place.
It was while on the labor gang that Bob got injured again from a sledgehammer grazing his leg while working.
I couldn't walk, so they put me in a hospital, and that's when I met Birdman.
The infamous Birdman, Robert Stroud, originally convicted of murdering a barber after claiming he didn't pay for a prostitute that Stroud himself was pimping out.
The only time you could see him was if you spent the overnight in the hospital, because that's where his cell was.
Stroud was also incarcerated in Leavenworth, long before Bob was there. In 1916, he stabbed a guard to death in the mess hall in front of 1,100 men and was sentenced to death by hanging. However, his mother pleaded to the courts for her son's life, and his sentence was commuted to a life sentence in solitary confinement. Stroud spent 30 years in Leavenworth and 17 in Alcatraz, 42 of them which were in isolation. So why was he called the Birdman? Well, while in Leavenworth, he found an injured canary in the recreational yard. After nursing it back to health, he was permitted to breed birds and maintain a lab inside 2 adjoining segregation cells, as the warden found this to be a productive use of Stroud's time. He ended up raising nearly 300 birds in his cells and actually authored 2 books on canaries and their diseases. Interestingly, when I Googled him, He comes up as an American author first, before you read on that he's also a murderer. So this is why Robert Stroud is called the Birdman. But back to Bob and his stay up in the hospital wing. To pass the time, a lot of the convicts learned different languages, and Spanish was a popular choice. So there was Bob, laid up in a hospital cell, practicing his Spanish out loud, when he heard a voice correct him on his pronunciation.
I was trying to learn, and as I talk these words, I hear a voice tell me the pronunciation was, how to pronounce it right. And I said, "Who are you?" And it was Birdman.
Besides working in the clothing factory and on the labor gang, Bob was also assigned to the docks, a natural fit due to his Navy career. It was this job that proved to be one of his most important. At least that's what his blockmates, Frank Morris and the Englund brothers, might say, the three men who were able to escape. I mentioned them earlier. Clarence and John Englund were farm boys, and they were in Alcatraz not because they were so dangerous, but more because they wouldn't stop trying to escape from prison. The brothers were known burglars and had even robbed a bank with a toy gun. Between a bank they robbed in Alabama and the attempted escapes from the Atlanta State Penitentiary, they were finally sent over to the Rock. That's where they met the other two men involved in the escape, Frank Morris and Allen West. Bob's association with them was by chance, as they were all seated at the same mess hall table. At this point in our conversation, Bob pulled out a picture of the cafeteria from one of his Alcatraz books and began to walk Alejandro and I through the seating arrangements.
Here, 10-man tables.
Okay.
Here's a 10-man table, and here's the seating arrangements of the 10-man table. Mine was right here, the second one from the end. And here was Clarence Englund, John Englund, Allen West, and Frank Morris.
So there's the connection. Boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom.
At every meal where they'd come out and they would say, "We're having a problem with this," and ask everybody on the table for help. And if we couldn't help them, we knew somebody who could, so we sent them over to them people. There must have been 100 people involved in that escape.
And Bob was one of them. Because of this job, Bob had access to some valuable information.
I was down on the docks working, and this is the best job you could ever find in a prison. I mean, there's no wall between me and the freedom. There's nothing but water, and I can see the cities around me. I seen the guard reading the paper that he brought in his lunchbox during his lunch break. And I thought, well, damn, he's got that San Francisco paper there. Every San Francisco paper's got the tide tables in.
Tide tables show the daily predictions for the time of low and high tides, as well as the height of those tides for a specific coastal region.
And all I have to do is go into his lunchbox when he's not there, take out the tide tables, write them down because I couldn't take the tables. He might miss it. And then put the paper back in his lunchbox. And I didn't give it to the Englunds at the dining room table because I didn't want to get caught there. I just carry out in the yard on weekends and give them the tables that I picked up during the week.
Did you want to go with them?
No. In fact, they asked me, and I said, no way. I didn't. I said, you're not going to make it.
So do you think they made it?
No. I know they didn't make it. I gave them the tide tables, which means they know when the tides are coming in and when the tides are going out. It has to be timed perfectly. They have no watch. They don't know what time it is. After they get out of that cell, there's no way, and while they're in the cell, nobody knows what time it is. Except when they turn the lights on at 9:30, so we knew it was 9:30. That weekend, they were out in the yard saying goodbye to everybody.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
All their friends. It's unbelievable how many people knew about this escape. And it scared the hell out of me. They used to tell me something about that when they would do this and do. I said, I don't want to know that. It had nothing to do with my end of this. I didn't want them to think I knew so much that if they did, when they got caught, they would say, Bob knew about this. And I hate to kill somebody in there. And so I said, no, I'm not going to involve myself with this escape.
This was the plan. The brothers, Morris and West, dug out the concrete around a vent in the back of each of their cells. To do this, some say they used spoons from the dining room, but Bob said they also had drill bits and similar items given to them by other inmates from the prison workshops. All in all, it took about 6 months to dig out their vents to be wide enough for them to slip through. When the holes got too big to be hidden, they created fake vent frames with painted cardboard that matched the original vents almost perfectly from a distance. Then, through some scavenging and favors handed over by other inmates, the 4 men created papier-mâché heads of themselves. They even cut some of their own hair to glue on top.
Morris's head looks just like Morris. I got a picture of both Morris's face and his head.
I looked at the 2 pictures. I had to admit there was a resemblance which made Bob more than happy, as I found out the 2 never really liked each other much. As Bob put it, they were both extremely intelligent and both alphas. They just didn't mix. That night, they stuffed their beds with extra blankets and put the papier-mâché heads on their pillows, making it look as if they were fast asleep in their cells. The plan was to sneak out the widened vents as soon as the lights went out. I know, it sounds like something out of a Scooby-Doo getaway scene.
We knew they get left at 9:30 out of the cells, and we all were staying awake to make noises that would cover their noise. The whole cell block that knew about it was involved in this.
Once each of the men were out of their cells, they climbed up the pipes and scaffolding within the walls and met at another large vent that led to the roof. West had discovered that vent while working a job in that area of the prison.
During the regular hours, it's quiet. You can hear a pin drop. But at night, after the lights go out, it is like a tomb. It's really, really quiet. So any little noise, the scraping they were making, climbing up that wall, hitting the pipes and everything.
You heard all that.
Oh, yes, because we were tuned to it. And the guards were so brainwashed in the fact that once they're locked up in their cell, forget about it. You're safe now. Now we got 8 hours of safety, contentment, relax, because they're all the bad guys are locked up and nothing to worry about until morning.
But such was not the case on that night, June 11th, 1962. Once the Anglin brothers and Morris got to the vent that led to the roof, one of them had to hoist themselves up, loosen the cover, and lower it. The problem was, only one of them could fit into this tiny space they needed to access to get the cover off. To complicate things further, the vent cover was heavy, and whoever removed it dropped it.
Well, when they were lowering it, and when that vent hit the roof with a loud clang, it was like a tube in there. I almost jumped out of bed, but the noise was so loud. And I thought, well, how do you cover something like that? I said, there goes the ball game. They're caught. When they get out of the hole, I'll give them some cigarettes.
But they didn't get caught. Not Morris and the Anglin brothers, anyway. Alan West, on the other hand, he never made it out of his cell. He claimed he couldn't fit through the hole he dug. Others say he got cold feet and never tried. Bob watched the whole thing unfold by sticking his shaving mirror through his bars and tilting it down the corridor.
We were watching that with our mirror because we knew they were going to be short for count. And I wanted to get his reaction when he got to the cell. And the dummy head didn't get up and stand. You got to stand up for count in the morning.
Okay.
There's so many stand-up counts, and to make sure you're there. Otherwise, you're just counting heads all night long.
No pun intended. The first cell the guard came to was Morris's.
When he got to him, he says, okay, Morris, get up. Morris, get up. And he wouldn't get up, of course. So he says, Lieutenant, we got a man here who won't get up. He said, I'll take care of it. And he went right by my cell, stumping down there. He went down there and he says, He put his arm inside the bars and he slapped a pillow right next to the head. And the pillow popped up in the air and hit the deck, and his feet left the ground and jumped back 4 feet. I like it went nuts. And he started blowing on his whistle, along. And he says, holy Christ. And then next door was, anyway, everybody started cheering when the whistle went off, knew the escape happened, and the count was short, and everybody's cheering now. And then a couple hours later, we started hearing explosions outside where they were throwing hand grenades in all the caves around the island, so in case anybody was hiding in there, they'd be blown. That's what they do. Anyway, that was the escape.
The Anglin brothers and Frank Morris were never seen again, not by anyone who could prove they saw them anyway. Some, mostly inmates, say they made it and ended up living in South America. Others, mostly guards, say they drowned in the bay. And you already know Bob agrees with that theory. It's probably the only time in Bob's life he's ever agreed with a guard. Either way, their bodies were never found, which keeps me wondering if they did in fact live out the rest of their lives in freedom. And in the meantime, even though Alan West stayed behind, he was never seen again by any of the inmates either, as he was hauled off to the hole. Unfortunately, sometime later, so was Bob, but not for his role in the Great Escape. During all this time we've covered, we've never talked about Bob's relationships or his wives, which is a relevant bit of information that leads us into our next moment in Bob's story.
Betty, Shirley. I had so many women.
How many wives have you had?
3. Shirley, the first one, she divorced me when I went to Alcatraz. And when I got out, she wanted me back, so I married her after I got out, too.
It was during the first divorce, Bob found himself in a dark hole.
I told Gino, I said, well, my wife divorced me finally. And he says, well, my wife in Chicago has got a girlfriend, redhead, didn't like her, big boobs. And he gave me her picture. Now, when we go to Alcatraz, everything you own that you bring in there is put on a desk, and they stamped your number on 1355 on everything that you bring in there. And his number is 1356. So we had a smudge at 6, and I made it into a 5. It wasn't perfect, but it was smudged enough that it looked a bit handled, and it was not under investigation.
At least it wasn't under investigation until Bob found himself on the end of one of the guards' random searches.
Well, they have shakedowns, and they come in, tear everything up. The bed's all tore up, and they look under the mattress, and there's very little places to hide anything in a cell that's 5 foot by 5 by 7 by 9 foot long. And I seen the guard. He found this picture that the number on the back of it was smeared, and he couldn't make it up what the number was for sure. And he checked my record to see what the number was, and I didn't bring no pictures in. So they took me to court and wanted to know who I got the picture from. Well, I wouldn't tell. I'm not a snitch. I've never been a snitch.
Bob really did live by a code of honor in regard to snitching. He believed in taking it to your grave, no matter the cost, with one exception. We're going to take a quick flashback to a moment in Bob's childhood, all the way back before his father died. Bob couldn't have been more than 5 years old.
My brother, who's older than me, he went hunting one time and brought home some rabbits, dead rabbits, and told me one of them was the Easter Bunny. And drove me crazy. I was only 5 years old, and he killed the Easter Bunny. So I told Dad about it. I was a snitch then. I told Dad that I couldn't forgive him for that. Easter Bunny's dead, holy shit. Dad went crazy. And he told Dee, don't never do that shit to my kids.
So there you have it. That's the one time Bob snitched in his entire life. In the case of Gino and the girl in the photo, Bob stuck to his code of honor.
So they started asking me, says, just tell us who it was. And I said, no, my name is Robert Scheiblein, 1355 is my number. And that was all I would say. And they asked me any question, I say, Robert Scheiblein, AZ 1355. And they said, take him away, put him in isolation. I'm a rebel. So any joint I go into, I'm introduced to their hole. I screw up all the time. I spent 7 days in the hole many times. I just used to walk in the park. Here, 7 days is serious shit. It's 7 days, bread and water, and blackout. You can put your hand in front of your face and not see it. It is, you don't know understand the word black until they put you in a hole there. And it's soundproof almost. Then you got 3 days of bread and water. 4th day, they have to feed you a meal. So they bring in your boiled potato, small one, a spoonful of peas, which contains about 12, and a raw onion. That's your meal. Then you're back to bread and water again for the next 3 days. Now, they give you 2 big hunks of bread and the water. The bread, you eat 1 piece, but the other piece you don't. You save that. Because at night, the wharf rats, the water rats, huge animals, come out at night. You can't hear, you can't see them, but you can hear they're in the cell with you. And that's why you extra piece of bread. You save it for the rats, otherwise they'll start eating you. They're nibbling on your feet and fingers and toes. You don't go to sleep when they're around. Oh. And you hear them slithering noises, but you can't never see the son of bitches. And after about the 5th day, I was looking at that second piece of bread and I thought, well, it's starting to taste like cake now. I thought, well, I'm not sure I want to share this with a rat. Oh my God. But I ended up letting him for sure. And after 7 days, I got out and I never screwed up again. That was the reason I was in the hole, because I had a stupid picture of a woman, a little 4x6, not obscene picture, but she was enhanced, but She was fully dressed. I told Gina when I got out, I didn't even want to know that woman anymore.
Long after this conversation with Bob, I found myself wondering how he even knew to save that piece of bread for the rats. And so, once again, I found myself on the phone with Bob, and I was glad I asked.
I want to know how you knew and how everyone knew to make sure you saved a little bread for those rats. Like, do people tell each other that? Do the guys inside say, make sure you save some bread?
I don't know anything about how other people did, just myself. But when they opened the door of that solid front, and just before they slammed it shut, somebody in a tier above me hollered, save some bread for your friends or your visitors or something like that. And I don't know to this day who that was, but I'm grateful for him for the rest of my life.
Bob did a total of 5 years in Alcatraz. He did his time without seeing one visitor, his choice. I imagined not seeing anyone from the outside for 5 whole years. No one from your past. Everyone except those inside with you, completely erased from your present. It was a daunting thought. During one of my visits to Alcatraz, there was something else that I learned that really got to me. When you go through the tour, there's a point when the audio guide places you in front of a tiny window, kind of the length of a shoebox, but only about 3 inches wide. When you look through it, you can see San Francisco, far across the bay. The guide mentions that on an active night, such as New Year's Eve, you could actually hear the festivities, like music and even soft laughter. I asked Bob if this was true.
Oh, yes, when the wind was just right and the wind was open. When the windows were open and the wind was just right, thank God it wasn't that way often, we could hear the sounds of people laughing at the yacht club or wherever it was, giggling or laughing or howling, beeping horns, sometimes music, a wisp of it. It was a mile and a quarter away from there. And if the wind was right, it would wisp that sound to us. And it had to be a combination of all.
Bob was released from Alcatraz in 1964, and it did change him.
After I got to Alcatraz, I got shipped back to Leavenworth. I straightened out a little bit, and I stopped saying black when you holler white. And I stopped arguing with the guards, and I just did my own time. I stopped being an asshole.
What's interesting is you said your moment was a 5-year moment.
I don't think there was any one moment of that 5 years I was in there that I finally realized, who am I screwing by being such a rebel? But I think it was overriding 5 years of living there that I finally realized I just agree with them and I get out earlier.
Bob got out early for good behavior, serving just a little over 9 years of the 15 for the one bank robbery he was convicted for.
I've never, ever robbed a bank again. I haven't never killed anybody. I was clean. I had to do something to work, and the only thing I knew how to do other than rob banks is scuba diving. So I opened a dive shop up. And so the dive shop was making more money than robbing banks was without the danger of getting caught, and I didn't have to shoot nobody. So I thought, well, hell, I'll just play it straight. So, but not squeaky clean.
Squeaky clean or not, Bob stayed out of trouble enough to meet his third wife, Karen. It was on their third date that he came clean about his past.
I told her the whole story. And we sat down and we just talked all night long. We had no sex or nothing, we just talked. And she said she was so relieved that I wasn't a rapist or a dope smuggler. And she was religious, I'm atheist. So we didn't argue about religion. Everything was fine with us. We had no fights, no arguments. For 30 years we were married, and we just got along real good. Everything was perfect. The only trouble, I started teaching her martial arts. She flipped me, and I hit the deck hard. My back still hurts. I tried to show her how to self-protect. I didn't think she'd hurt me. Oh, she was my protector, a little bulldog.
Karen died in 2017, and Bob's been living on his own since. I wondered what she would have added to the story if she'd been sitting there with us while Bob showed off his Alcatraz mugshot. The black and white photo shows a very handsome 20-something Bob staring into the camera. He's got a little gleam in his eye that matches the half smile he's wearing. It's not a smirk, it's a smile, almost as if he's laughing at the officer taking the picture.
I feel like when I see this mugshot, I feel like I'm like, he thinks something's very funny. What were you, do you remember what you were thinking in that moment?
No.
I mean, look at, you do not look scared. You do not look upset. You look like, yeah, I'm awesome.
Yeah.
Like, you look like you do not care.
No. Well, I'm on Alcatraz. What else can they do to me? I'm at the bottom of the trash heap. There's nothing they can do to me that's worse
It's
than
like
Alcatraz.
the nicest picture.
Oh, well, I'm a nice guy. And here's my story.
I guess sometimes our life-changing moments don't boil down to specifically one big altering moment. That instead, the things that change us often are thousands of moments compressed into one gigantic moment of time. And it's these moments combined that define us and make us who we are as we live out our own individual stories. But you know me, I still had one last question for Bob.
Why? Like, do you get a high off it?
What?
Or do you, okay, so we all have like these fantasies, but you actually went out and did it, right? So, I mean, maybe we don't all, but many of us might have these crazy fantasies of living this other bad life.
Yeah.
But you did it. So my question is like, why? Just for the money, or is there a rush?
Money. I really like the money. And I didn't like the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not going back to the joint. That's different.
This episode of Shadow Clock was created by me. Story editing is by Adam Gould and me. Location sound is by Alejandro Velez. Our post-audio editor is Josh Kobach. Additional post-production audio is by Matt Saro. Social media is managed by Alec Jansen and Kelsey Hayes. Music is credited to Pond5 and Premium Beat. Content contributors, composers, and individual song titles for each episode can be found on our website at shadow-clock.com. Kate Cosgrove creates original illustrations for each episode of Shadow Clock, which you can also see at shadow-clock.com. If you like the show, you can spread the word by telling someone else about Shadow Clock, and, of course, by following us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Shadow Clock Podcast, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Shadow Clock Pod, and on YouTube at Shadow Clock. I personally want to express just how much it means every time you give us a click, a like, a subscribe, or follow. And we love word-of-mouth endorsements. Your support means the world, and I can't thank each and every one of you enough. Speaking of thanks, a special thanks goes out to Alejandro Velez, Adam Gould, Alec Jansen, Kate Cosgrove, Josh Kobach, Matt Saro, Johnny Messina, Bruce Sibley, Adam Zavislak, Austin Krieg, Forest Hills Northern High School in Michigan, Duro Howard, and Kelsey Hayes. Lastly, I want to thank our guest, Bob Scheiblein, for sharing his story with us. He kept me on my toes the entire time. And with that, I'm Katie Mahalik, and this is Shadow Clock.